All right. We have a couple of panelists that we have invited. Barr is director at Pittsburgh Supercomputing, and Gwen is part of the uh, Research Computing Alliance, sorry, Cyber Infrastructure Alliance of Oregon. I don't know exact role that you are in, Gwen, so maybe both Gwen and Barr can introduce themselves and share their respective experiences. And up to you who want to go first.
Gwen, feel free.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to see everyone again. For those of you who know me, you know me from my previous work at University of Hawaii, where I was there for 10 years building cyber infrastructure, basically statewide for the statewide university system. I retired from my position and I now live in Portland, Oregon, and I got involved with a group that is trying to do a lot of the things we accomplished in Hawaii in Oregon, very kind of different environment. We wrote a CC Star strategy grant. The PI is Christy Long at the University of Oregon, and I am a consultant. And involved in some other areas as well. Barr, to you.
Yeah, Barr von Oehsen. I'm the executive director for the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, and I've been working very closely with the R1 universities in the state of Pennsylvania and looking at what a statewide solution around computing, AI, quantum might look like. And so, it talked about establishing a statewide initiative. We're in the process. I'm actually sitting in our government relations groups building in Harrisburg, getting ready to meet with all of the R1 universities tomorrow to talk about next steps. So, we're moving forward, going very quickly because everything else is going very quickly, and just trying to keep up with the pace. So, be glad to talk through some of this stuff as as the conversations kind of evolved over time.
We had prepared some questions for the panelists that are actually listed in the call doc. So if you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to add those to the call doc, or please feel free to unmute yourself and ask those questions. So I'll get started with the first question so what were the motivations for establishing these statewide initiatives at your respective states?
Well, that's a good question. I'll start. Really, at the University of Hawaii, when I was there, we did not have any statewide cyber infrastructure or research computing infrastructure when I arrived in 2023. So really the goal was, and at that point, our then president, David Lassner, was very keen on especially growing computer science, data science, AI, and others. And so the initiative was really to just start from scratch and put in place a research computing group. To serve all of the state universities. So the motivation behind it was really a lot of it was top down from the senior leadership, which was really an advantage, I think. And the other was just to be able to support the research mission with advanced technology.
So in Pennsylvania, multiple reasons why. The first one that really kind of got it started, and this is true of Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center. As you all know, AI infrastructure requires a lot of power, and it needs a lot of direct liquid cooling now. The racks are getting more and more dense. And so some of the conversations we've been having across the state was that our data centers are starting to age out. The capacity, it just wasn't there to be able to support the AI infrastructure. And so the conversation was around, what would a statewide solution, kind of like an MGHPCC up in Massachusetts, look like, where we could pool our resources and build a data center or lease a data center and be able to expand our AI capabilities rather than doing it alone. If you attended GTC recently, I think Jensen was talking in terms of 1 megawatt racks. And that just kind of blows your mind when you start thinking about how do you support that. The original data center that Penn was using only allowed 7 kW per rack. So it's like, there's a huge motivating factor right there, is just in the data centers. The other piece is the funding part, right? So the federal funding landscape is changing drastically, and there seems to be a little bit of a pushback on universities. And so if you look at a lot of the initiatives that are coming out, like DOE's Genesis project or the America's AI plan, it really doesn't mention universities at all in there. And if you look at the tech labs call for information just recently, it specifically says no universities or academic institutions, but these private nonprofit organizations can start thinking about this as going after them. And so um, it just makes a lot more sense for us to work together and form what we're calling the Keystone AI and Quantum Factory, to be sort of that front end to the universities and to these federal projects. And so, we're looking at all different types of solutions to figure out how we can make ourselves as competitive as possible given the current landscape. So, I can go on. I mean, there's workforce development, there's a whole economic development piece that's of interest to the state that universities are really good at doing. Pittsburgh supercomputing is really good at doing. How do we keep startups in the state? All of these other initiatives, and they see AI and quantum as a way to do that. So, a lot of reasons why people are interested in doing this.
So then
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gwen.
was going to just say a couple comments about the motivation behind the effort in Oregon now. I think unlike University of Hawaii, there is no statewide university system. We have about 4 R1s and 4, I would say, emerging research institutions within the state institutions. Recently, the first shared computing resource is now led by Will Pasner at Portland State. And in 2027, with a generous gift from Jensen Wong, who is an alumnus of Corvallis of Oregon State, they're opening up a whole new innovation center. So as a group of folks that are involved in research computing just started to have conversations around how do we get universities to talk to each other? How do we get folks to collaborate more? How do the haves help the have-nots? So yeah, so a few new things, and also just to mention that Oregon is in the running for one of the large NSF Engine Awards focused on semiconductors. So there's a lot of excitement around that if that gets awarded. So lots of reasons, but Oregon, very, very not well knit together in terms of collaboration across institutions. So this was really an effort to start that conversation.
So how did you get started? Like, I mean, like, did you initiate it or state initiated? How did you get started?
So for Oregon, so those of you that know me well, we were having a lot of conversations. There's a research computing group that meets every other Monday from Oregon State, University of Oregon, Portland State, others, primarily just to talk about ways, challenges and opportunities. And there was a lot of talk about doing a strategic plan. And so I was, let's do the strategic plan. And then it's like, are we going to get the VPRs to buy into it and all that? And I said, okay, this is cool, but why don't we just write a grant? So my view about strategic planning, I think it's great. I think a grant is like a strategic plan with money. So I will always fall on the side of wanting to, and I think also it raises the level of recognition and and help spread the word about what's going on in Oregon.
Yeah, so for us, it started off with government relations group that we work directly with, and so I'm sitting in their office right now. And I definitely recommend that if you don't know your university's government relations group, get to know them because they are so well connected within, in DC and also in your state, and been extremely helpful for us. Now, Pittsburgh Supercomputing, we're associated with both Pitt and CMU. And so we tap into both of those universities, government relations people. They all work really well together. But we're finding that that whole sort of community across the state, they all know each other really well. And in fact, tomorrow we have a working group that's focused just on the government relations piece. And so getting everybody together on the same page, talking the same language. So when they go to state legislatures or go to DC, everybody's saying the same thing. So we're trying to coordinate it across that. But so what happened was that we were knocking on different senators and representatives' doors and introducing ourselves and having conversations. And then eventually it led into the Department of Community and Economic Development within the Shapiro administration. And we met with a person, so Jen Gilberg, who sort of works within the technology piece of that office. And it turned out that she also used to work at Intel. And so we hit it off immediately. And she was just like, "Oh my God, I can geek out with somebody finally." And so we had a great conversation, and she was telling us that what was happening was that each of the R1 universities and some of the smaller ones were coming to her and asking for state help in supporting, upgrades to data centers and, other sort of technology initiatives. And she was thinking, this is crazy. We should all be working together on sort of a common goal. And so she asked me to put in a proposal to the state on what that might look like. And so I went back and threw something together, handed it to her, and thought, well, that was the end. We'll never hear back on it. And but a month or so later, reached out and said, let's talk through some of this stuff. Now, I mean, it was a large amount of money, of course, and it kind of freaked them out. But NVIDIA came behind us and said, that's actually the number should be higher than what they proposed. So that helped a little bit, but we're not even anywhere close to what we proposed. But it did get the conversation started, and for tomorrow, I'm kind of looking at the history of this, and we're moving pretty quickly. But it started off with me going around to different areas within the states, having conversations with the different universities, getting sort of a feel as to what the universities were interested in. Is this something that you'd like to participate in? We got the thumbs up. I sent out a survey asking for information on how much they're spending on their research computing and data services, how much they're investing in AI, what their thoughts on quantum. So I collected all that information just to have sort of a baseline of, okay, what's everybody spending on this stuff? Huge difference between public and private, which was kind of interesting. But so anyway, it's just, and I think, again, the timing, what was happening in the federal government, everybody was, freaking out over, future funding. It just all seemed to come together and made a lot of sense as far as being able to support each other as we're trying to figure out sort of this new world order with the federal funding. So anyway, there were a lot of reasons to get started, but it was just interesting. It's finding that right person within your state government that understands sort of the tech landscape, because there are a lot of people talking about AI, right? They're talking, but they don't really understand it at all. And so finding that person who does have a pretty good understanding, or at least enough of a technical background to have an understanding, is extremely helpful.
So you mentioned several stakeholders, several partners, right? So how is this structured? Like, who are the partners? What do different partners bring to the table? Uh, what is their responsibility and so on? How are the efforts structured?
Barr, why don't you start with that one and then I'll follow up.
Okay. Yeah, so initially, and again, this came out because of meeting with Jen Gilberg in Department of Community and Economic Development. She'd been talking with the R1s, and so in the state of Pennsylvania, there are 8 of them. You've got Drexel, Penn, and Temple in the Philadelphia area. You've got Lehigh University, which is not that far outside of Philadelphia. And then you've got Penn State University, and then Carnegie Mellon and University of Pittsburgh. So we've got 7 R1s. We've got a fairly large statewide system. So the PASHE schools is what we call them. It's the Pennsylvania something, 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 but we just say PASHE. And then we have a lot of small liberal arts colleges, of all shapes and sizes, and then community. And before everybody jumped on, I was saying that in the state of Pennsylvania alone, we have over 200 colleges and universities of all shapes and sizes. So it's a huge amount. So our strategy is, let's work with the R1s first, figure it out. And then once we get that figured out, then we can loop in the R2s. And we're talking with the R2s anyway, so that's not going to be a difficult transition. And then start thinking about all the other schools within the state of Pennsylvania. And so really are interested in democratizing access to AI and quantum, and that's our end goal. But we figured we'd start with the R1s and then kind of work our way through the entire system and figure this out. We're running something called Adapt PA, which PSC is running Adapt PA, and its focus is on community colleges and introducing AI into the curriculum. So we're working with faculty at the community colleges, give them access to our resources. We've set up containerized applications so the students can go in and just fire them up and run them and stuff like that. So there are all these pieces that make a lot of sense. For the R1s, each R1 has their strengths in research. They bring a lot to the table. There's a lot of workforce development coming out of the universities. There's a lot of interesting research. There's also a lot of overlap between all the different universities. So we're sort of working with them and leveraging all of their capabilities as we start building out these statewide initiative. One of them is that most of these universities have their own research, computing, and data groups. And if we are going to be building out a statewide solution, our interest is let's tap into the expertise at each of the universities. They represent the universities, but they help support the statewide resources. So anyway, there's a lot of work to be done, but I feel like we've come a long way in the last year.
Yeah, I'll just echo a lot of things that Barr said, and again, being such a newbie to Oregon, I'm learning a lot. Chrissy Long has very good connections with with the government relations folks. They're very excited about this project. At this stage, it's a lot of kind of newsletters going out about the promise of these kinds of collaborations. Within our project, one of the things we started with was engaging the top leadership, the CIOs and VPRs as part of the project to get their buy-in. Now, their buy-in was contributing a letter of collaboration, and now we're going to do 8 campus visits. As part of that, we will meet with all the upper leadership to see if we can get buy-in across. I think a lot of this is very similar to things I experienced in Hawaii. The R1s have resources, have research computing groups. The R2s and emerging research institutions have very little. So, but there's also a group called the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. That's kind of the replacement for what a university system would look like. And they are very, very focused on statewide efforts. Statewide efforts, not just the R1s and the R2s, but really trying to reach out to all of to the state institutions as well as the community colleges. Workforce is huge. People are talking about workforce all the time. As you know, we have Intel, Nike, and a few other, really large companies. But most of them are in the Portland area, and much of Oregon is very rural and quite poor. So those are those kinds of challenges there. One thing that I haven't experienced, I mean, the partners we'd like to make is we have a number of donors in the state. Phil and Penny Knight have donated, massive amounts of money to the University of Oregon, as part of Nike, and now Jensen Wong, his donation to build a state-of-the-art supercomputer there in Corvallis. Trying to figure out how you kind of tap into those kinds of opportunities. That's new for me, and I think it's new for many of the universities trying to figure out how to build those relationships. We do have, just wondering what is the state wants workforce development. They understand that this is where the universities come from, but oftentimes there's this big gap between the employers and the universities. What's the pathway between there? Is it internships? What is it? One of the groups we're working with is quite interesting, is called the Technology Association of Oregon. And this is basically just a very large group of all the startups, all the AI startups, all the very tech startups and stuff. And talking with those folks and asking them, what are you looking for? And oftentimes they're looking for something more from graduates than what they're getting. They're looking for graduates that have, actually experience working in teams, working in technology, stuff they're not necessarily getting from the students once they graduate. So that conversation is ongoing and it's interesting. And I think the big change for Oregon now is and this is a challenge. I'd love to hear some solutions about this. How do you actually share resources across institutions? We all need a better data center. We need more data. We need more infrastructure for data. The R1s have some infrastructure in place, but they're running out of it. The other ones don't. What is a good model for actually sharing across institutions? I think initially, and what Barr said about working with the research computing groups, again, I think that's an excellent place to start. If you can engage those folks and make sure there's at least one or two people at some of the smaller institutions to really get folks talking about how to make things easier for, accessing shared resources. A number of our institutions aren't members of Internet 2, right? So, there's that. Uh, so, yeah, it's a challenge, and I think it's really a very different landscape than certainly what I've been used to in the past in terms of looking to NSF and NIH and DOE for most of the funding, figuring out what's the state buying. The state probably already figures they're already paying for the universities. So what's the extra? Looking to you, Barr. Maybe you'll come up with an answer for that.
Working on it, working on it. But I agree completely with what you were saying about, reaching out to these different tech groups across your state. We're doing the exact same thing. We've been having conversations about starting up apprenticeship programs and things like that. And so there's, it's definitely a great way to start and get involved. And you find out about the startups. There are a lot of industry. And so what we're finding is that, and we're also, there are all these workshops coming up that are also focusing on these areas. But so there's state, there are the universities, there's philanthropists, and industry, right? And so, and then hopefully some funds out of the federal government as well. But the federal government is very targeted and it's starting to become much more specific and not necessarily, something that a researcher by themselves can go after in the future. So there's not going to be as much money to do that kind of stuff. So more block type grants. And so, coming up and so I see Catherine's on here from CASC. CASC is hosting a workshop that's focused on bringing state representatives and CI experts together on sort of these state initiatives. But there's a workshop ahead of that that brings in philanthropists and industry, and it's helping NSF sort of think about how to come up with these funding mechanisms to help these state initiatives. NVIDIA has been very much involved in this, and so just like Gwen was saying, they were fortunate that they have that connection. But the co-founder for NVIDIA, Chris Malachowski, who kind of the quiet person behind the scenes, put together a white paper called the 50 State AI Strategy on because they saw what happened in Florida when they put a system there, what's happening in Oregon. These ecosystems start naturally, building up, and so how do we tap into that? And so they're certainly getting involved in this. And then I just got invited to a DOE Genesis program workshop that again is bringing academic institutions, philanthropists, industry together with DOE to talk about how we all work together. So it's just fascinating how this is changing, and it's happening so fast that it's really difficult to keep up with all of this. And so just even within the state and having conversations with all the universities, it's you have to have the right people in the room, right? You have to have the VPRs and the CIOs in the room, people who have can directly report to the chancellor or the presidents of the universities and keep them up to date on this. And each university has sort of their philanthropists that they work with, and so how do we bring all this together? And so really fascinating conversations happening across the entire state that really had never happened before, and it's a huge opportunity for us because AI really depends upon everything we do. So we should be in the middle of all of this. And so, if you don't feel like you are, reach out to your government relations people and get involved. It's extremely helpful. They're a good group of people to work with.
I think it's really interesting. And I did see I'm going to compliment Catherine and others in CASC of the workshop that you're putting together. But in some ways, the EPSCoR program has been around for more than 30 years, right? And that EPSCoR's goal was always that, put large grants in place that are supposed to have a statewide partnership and a statewide need. And I think having been in, at Montana State and then at University of Hawaii, seeing the major positive impacts that EPSCoR can have in terms of hiring faculty, building infrastructure, and many of the states through the EPSCoR program had developed very very good connections, strong connections between the universities who are running the EPSCoR programs and also and the state government. And in many cases, the old EPSCoR awards, the $20 million awards, those required a state match. And in many cases, the state actually put real dollars on the table to help invest in that state infrastructure. So I think it's fascinating to see that this whole idea about statewide efforts and collaboration across the universities, industry, and also the government is I saw another workshop just like this too that was advertised recently. So it's interesting to see where this is coming from. And I think there's tons to learn from the EPSCoR program, but remember, the EPSCoR program is limited to a certain set of states, not to all.
So that was actually a question that was put in the call talk by Bill. Bill, do you want to ask your question? Because it seems relevant to this particular discussion.
I don't know. I think Barr just answered it.
But
But I think it's great that this is happening, and I'm kind of looking forward to the cask session. So hopefully, we can all learn from these things. At Massachusetts, we have an initiative that's been going on for some years too. So I think that we would love to contribute and learn from what other folks are doing.
yeah, so I think that's what my question was is uh, based on your experience, like what advice would you give someone trying to start a similar initiative? Like what were the surprises? What to look out for?
Hmm. Well, I've been saying all along, get to know your government relations people because they're extremely helpful. And don't be shy about, going to your state capital and knocking on doors of people and just having conversations. I found that and it doesn't even have to be about work. It's just we've just had conversations about life experiences and stuff like that, and get to know people. And if you're in there enough times, they know exactly who you are, and you get invited to sessions and other things, and so it's just extremely helpful. What surprised me? I would say that, and it probably shouldn't have been a surprise, but just how tech illiterate people in government are. And so, my the experience that I had was, the Shapiro administration has this new transformation office or something, and I just remember having a conversation and talking about what Pittsburgh supercomputing was doing and how we're interested in building out state resources and, opening up AI capabilities and workforce development. And his first question is why do we need supercomputers when we have ChatGPT? And so I was like, okay, I have to, really step back a little bit here and realize that I need to start at a much different level than I was coming in with, and so that was eye-opening. And the other thing is that like I said earlier, many people who are making decisions about AI in our states have no real understanding of what AI is, and so that's a challenge, right? And a lot of them are very scared about it. Now, the Shapiro administration made ChatGPT and other tools available to every person in the state government, made available to it, paid for all the licenses for everybody, and has been really pushing people to start using it. So there is some sort of understanding in the state of Pennsylvania, but it's all magic, right? What is needed to support all that? It's just a button on our phone or a prompt on a computer screen. That's it, and they don't understand what it takes to actually support all of that. And so that's part of our job, is to just remind them how important it is for investment in the infrastructure, investment in the people who can support that infrastructure. It's not just people to go on and get PhDs or, go into college, but it's also support, creating these tracks for people who are very tech savvy, who are more interested in getting their hands dirty, but actually using, building out compute capabilities, getting involved in file systems, networking, all of these pieces. How do we support all of that? So, most of the workforce development is more about sort of the education and, the sort of the stepping stones to get into college and beyond to jobs, but very little is focused specifically on being able to support the tech piece of it.
Um, I would say, what surprised many things that Barr said. Yeah, it is once you get into the tech landscape and you can speak the language and you understand it, you quickly learn how many people don't know that language and don't know what you're talking about. And that's in the university and that's outside of the university. I think, one thing, as Bob was saying, things are moving so quickly, but in many cases, in order to make progress, it's really personal. You need to make those personal connections. You need to, how do you get invited to that meeting where they're making decisions about AI and you think there's nobody from the university there? How does that happen? That happens through building those kind of personal relationships. I think the one thing I've been somewhat surprised, but not really surprised, is just how similar the issues are across all institutions. Everybody's got a strategic plan. Some people have resources, some people don't. How do you get to the point of, if you're an R1, why bother sharing with an R2? What does it get you? So it's a lot of those conversations take time, and oftentimes trying to help people understand the benefit when they don't see it. Or I think the other thing we talk about a lot, especially at smaller institutions, and this isn't surprising, is what we call the scarcity mindset. So this mindset that, we have so little, how can we do this? How can we actually, build a new program in AI, or increase our tech training for our students? And then you find out that these institutions don't know about things like access. They don't know about Jetstream. They don't know about CARC. They don't know about all these things. And so I guess I'm not surprised, but it's also a little frustrating to realize that there, especially for the smaller institutions, that there are free resources out there. There's smart faculty everywhere, and the fact that they don't know about them, you just wonder, how do you do that communication a little bit better? And I'll agree with Barr on the fact that, many of the folks in the tech landscape that I'm getting to know here, are also not aware of things like NAIR. What's NAIR? They don't know about that. They know about Intel, they know about things like that. They know about semiconductors, but they may not know about these other opportunities that are there for the universities. So just surprised that in many ways, many of the same issues are everywhere, and really looking for, and the solutions often come down to, as Barr was saying, those personal relationships across the board.
Absolutely.
So I had a couple more questions, but I'm going to let the floor open to the other members of the community if you have questions for the panelist. Yes, John, please go ahead.
In Ohio, we have always run a statewide operation. Ohio State does not have a supercomputer of its own. The Ohio Supercomputer Center was started back in the 1980s. And we're line items in the state budget under the Department of Higher Education of the state of Ohio. In order to understand the situation, you have to try to remember what the world looked like 40 years ago. It was an era of campus mainframes, of very little understanding of research computing across the landscape. Indeed, a group of us were out to bypass the campus computing at Ohio State. And we reached out to the Board of Regents. We brought together statewide groups to write proposals to the NSF when they were designing the supercomputer centers. The first round that became NCSA and UCSD. That was unsuccessful. There were two failed programs in that center, which most of you don't remember, one at Johns Hopkins and one at Cornell. So NSF did a second recompetition that became the Pittsburgh Supercomputer Center. And again, we didn't make it on that one. So we simply approached the legislature through the Board of Regents. And they funded us. They have continued to fund us. We are line items in the state budget, both capital and operating. In order to make this work, we had to build networking in Ohio because most of the universities had no networking at the time. So we also started a state networking operation, which continues to thrive as ORNet, which is the state data network. Both of them have persisted. ORNet has become a great success. It is most of the networking for state government. Even the things you don't think about. 911 runs over our network. PBS distributes the video over our network. So we brought all these things together and we run it as a statewide operation all along. It's been very successful. We cover both the publics and the privates. One large R1 in Ohio is Case Western Reserve, which is a private. And over the course of a year, about 50 colleges will teach at least one course using our supercomputer facilities. So in some sense, we've never had the other view. People have never been especially territorial. What made that work really was the effort we made by building out the network to make sure that everybody had equal as good an access as possible given their technology. You know, and in those days it was more complicated because TCP/IP was not common. We ran IBM proprietary protocols and we ran DECnet. But we've always run it this way, and we're very pleased with the outcome. It served the state very well, and we've also benefited from the fact that the state of Ohio runs a data center for state government, and we're simply a tenant in that data center. But because our power and cooling needs are different, we drive some of the policy there. But we're simply a tenant there, right next to taxation and the highway patrol. So we simply have a different model, and I encourage you to pursue such a strategy. It has been a great success for us. And in particular, it's allowed the smaller universities to recruit faculty in ways that they could not otherwise, because they would never have the resources to be competitive on computing. But in particular, we can put a theorist, not necessarily an experimentalist, we can put a theorist at a small university and make them productive. An experimentalist we can't produce the laboratory facilities. But for theory groups, it's been very successful. And I simply encourage you to pursue this. It has worked well for us for 40 years.
Yeah, and I agree completely with you, John. And so, getting to know your research and education network is absolutely essential to success. Because as John was saying, if you don't have the network connectivity to centralized or statewide services, then there's no point in even doing it. So your REN also has the connection to all the smaller colleges across the state that aren't connected up to internet too, for example, and things like that. So absolutely agree with you, John, that the networking piece is very key. And I work very closely with we have 3 different research and education networks in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm working hard to pull it all together into a single REN, and as we start building out this statewide initiative, all for the same reasons that John just gave.
And we made one contribution to the broad community. Open on demand comes from the Ohio Supercomputer Center, and it is widely used at many centers around the world. And we're very proud that we were able to bring that about. We have a research component within our supercomputer center that does projects like that. And it's been a great success for the community.
Thanks, John, for sharing your experience of setting up such initiatives. So I wanted to wrap the conversation with what are your sustainability plans? I think, John, you mentioned that you have been continuously going with state funding, but then I don't know if that's your plan, Barr and Gwen, or do you have other plans on sustainability?
We have a small deficit intentionally built into our budget. So we have to collect a little bit of money from the universities, but it's a small amount of money. It's $1 million a year across the state. Our operating state is providing about $7.5 million operating a year, and capital fluctuates with the tax receipts of the state. But our last supercomputer was about $9 million of state capital funding. I also note a change in audience. we began dominated, as you might imagine, by sciences and engineering. Our largest consumer now the Medical Center of Ohio State. And shall we say they have a lot more lobbying power than astronomers do.
So as far as sustainability, our general, I mean, that's why we're here in Harrisburg, is to talk through some of this stuff. The working groups are, one is focused on governance and others focused on, funding, and one is just on the infrastructure itself. And so we're starting to, break it out where the different universities are involved, or now, you know, able to share ideas and come together and work through some of these questions. But the general feeling is that, everybody's got to have skin in the game. We're looking at the universities contributing. We're looking at the state contributing. We're looking at industry contributing. We're looking at philanthropists contributing. So we're having conversations on all different levels on what this might look like. Just even to get ours started, all of the universities agreed to putting a certain amount of dollars towards, funding, just almost like an operations center. So just the group of people that are, working to coordinate it. We've got this nonprofit called Team PA. The governor sits on their board. So they're kind of a great go between the state government, academic institutions, industry, and so this money that's been put forth is help bring them on board and help to coordinate a lot of this and do the project management. And so really, the coordination office for what we're trying to do as we start building this out. So there is commitment already from the universities to get this started. And our hope is that, we hear something from the state government. There was a question in the chat about, did the Shapiro just put out his budget? It did not specifically call out the statewide initiative in his budget. But from what I understand, there is, and we haven't heard the details yet. And so I don't know if we're going to hear it tomorrow or what. I hope we do, but we'll see how it plays out. It may be, out of budget cycle type of funding, but we want to make sure that we get everybody on board. As Gwen was saying, in Oregon, there's a lot of rural communities there. Same with Pennsylvania, right? You got Philadelphia, you've got Pittsburgh, Harrisburg's kind of in the middle, and then everything else is very rural. And we have to make sure that everybody understands that what we're trying to do in the state, the more rural communities will benefit just as much as the cities and the suburbs and all of that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we march forward.
Yeah, I think I'm such a newbie in terms of thinking about sustainability. I mean, it is interesting. The state does support a number of kind of research institutes that are outside of the universities that have been put in place over the years. Some of those are more or less so the model for supporting something that is not part of the university but is focused on research and education or on a particular area of research, that there is a precedent for that. I think the opportunity now is to leverage this, really, I know we're all trying to keep up, but leverage this AI initiative. I think the challenge is helping folks in government, well, across the board, understand just what does it mean to have an AI initiative. I mean, I think NVIDIA gave a $10 million award for an AI initiative for Oregon, and what it turned out to be was a set of ambassadors to go around and help folks train up on NVIDIA's computing stack. That was one of the things they wanted to accomplish. And the rest is now going towards workforce development for semiconductors. So I think the thing that often gets left by the wayside is all those components of cyber infrastructure, the network, the data centers, the compute that you actually need to do an AI initiative, and being able to be successful statewide means engaging with the smaller universities and seeing how you can, what resources you can bring to bear. Yeah, sustainability is always a hard one. I'm really inspired by the Ohio State model. I guess I had not heard that. I'm not sure why not, but that's a great one to roll out. I know that Louisiana through the Lonnie Network often had a lot of state support for that. That's been very successful for them. A lot of that was through EPSCoR, but all of that was funded by the state as well. So don't have a lot of good answers, but certainly I think the fact that AI is changing everything at least gives, if you can bring that up in a conversation, that will get people's attention in terms of doing something that provides the infrastructure that's necessary.
Well, thanks everyone. So, as we close this session, I'd like to extend a sincere thank you to our panelists and also Barr and Gwen, both of you. Thank you so much, and thanks, John, for adding your perspective. Um, it was really valuable and great insights. So greatly appreciated your contribution. So I look forward to everyone for participating in our next call, which is on March 4th. Till then, thanks everyone and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.